Let's imagine something incredible happens tomorrow. Every adult in the country wakes up, checks their phone, and finds a notification from their bank. There it is. $1 million. This isn't a mistake. It isn't a high-interest loan or a sophisticated scam. It is a real, liquid $1 million sitting in your account, ready to be spent. Every neighbor, every coworker, and every person you pass on the street is suddenly a millionaire. At first, it sounds like the ultimate dream. No more financial stress. No more struggling to scrape together rent or worrying about the rising cost of utilities. The salary machine we've talked about before would seemingly be broken forever. People could quit the jobs they hate, buy their dream houses, travel to every corner of the globe, and finally start that business they've been dreaming about for years. It sounds like a paradise of total freedom. But here's the strange part that most people miss. If everyone suddenly had $1 million, most people wouldn't actually become rich. In fact, the economy would start changing so violently and so rapidly that the dream would vanish almost immediately. The reason has everything to do with the deep mechanics of how money actually functions in the real world. The moment everyone becomes a millionaire, something predictable and unstoppable happens. Massive, synchronized spending. Think about it. If you suddenly had $1 million, what would you do first? You'd probably head to the dealership for that new car, book a first-class flight, or call a realtor. Now, multiply that by millions of people. When demand suddenly explodes across every sector of the economy at the exact same time, the system hits a wall. There is a fundamental physical limit to the world. There are only so many Ferraris currently in showrooms. There are only so many prime steaks in the butcher shops. There are only so many seats on a plane to Hawaii. When millions of buyers show up with huge amounts of money, but the number of goods stays the same, sellers do the only logical thing. They raise prices. If 100 people want the same car and they all have $1 million, the dealer isn't going to sell it for $50,000. They are going to sell it to whoever bids the most. This is the first gear of inflation. Let's use housing as the perfect mechanical example. Imagine a city with 100,000 homes. Before everyone became a millionaire, maybe the average home cost around $300,000. That price was set by what people could actually afford to pay, based on their salaries. But now, every potential buyer has $1 million in cash. Suddenly, nobody wants to sell their house for $300,000 anymore, because they know everyone else is loaded. Buyers start competing, not with their hard-earned savings, but with their new million. The bidding wars become insane. $400,000 leads to $600,000, which leads to $900,000. Soon, houses that used to be starter homes cost $1.5 million or more. The house didn't get better. The roof isn't newer, and the neighborhood didn't change. The physical reality of the house stayed the same. The only thing that changed was the amount of money chasing it. This is a core idea behind inflation. Prices don't just depend on the value of the goods. They depend on the ratio of money to goods in the system. When you flood the system with money without increasing the houses, you don't create wealth. You just create higher price tags. This reveals the most important structural lesson in economics. Money is not the same thing as wealth. Wealth is made up of real, tangible things that support human life and comfort. The houses we live in, the food we eat, the energy that powers our grid, the technology that increases our efficiency, the factories that build our tools. Money is simply a measuring stick or a tool used to exchange those real things. It is a claim check on society's productivity. If you double the number of claim checks, but you don't double the amount of food or energy, each claim check just becomes worth less. If everyone becomes a millionaire overnight, the number 1 million stops meaning freedom and starts meaning average. If a loaf of bread starts costing $500 because the baker knows everyone has $1 million, then having $1 million doesn't make you rich. It just makes you able to afford bread. The purchasing power of the currency collapses to meet the new reality. Then, a second, more dangerous problem appears: the incentive gap. If everyone wakes up with $1 million, many people will decide to stop working. Why would you go to a difficult job at a construction site, a hospital, or a warehouse if you have $1 million in the bank? At least for a few months, a huge portion of the workforce would stay home. But the economy is a living organism that requires constant maintenance. Cities still need engineers to keep the water running. Hospitals still need doctors. Restaurants still need staff to cook the food people now have the money to buy. If fewer people want to work, businesses have to offer astronomical wages just to get someone to show up. But when a restaurant has to pay a waiter $500 an hour, they have to charge $200 for a burger to stay in business. This adds even more heat to the inflation spiral. You have more money, but there are fewer people producing things, which makes the remaining goods even more expensive. Now the system starts feeding into itself in a death spiral. People have more money. They spend it, so prices rise. Workers demand more money to pay the higher prices. Businesses raise prices again to pay the higher wages. Eventually, the $1 million that felt enormous at first starts feeling tiny. Groceries cost thousands. Rent costs tens of thousands. A basic car costs $1 million. The number on your bank statement hasn't changed, but the purchasing power, what that money can actually do for you, has evaporated. This is why simply creating money does not create prosperity. Real wealth depends entirely on productivity. The ability of an economy to produce valuable goods and services efficiently. If you don't increase the productivity, the money is just paper. So if giving everyone a pile of cash doesn't work, what actually creates wealth? How do societies actually get richer over time? The answer is production and innovation. Real economic growth happens when we become better at creating things with less effort. It's the invention of the tractor that allows one farmer to feed thousands. It's the energy system that powers a factory. It's the internet that allows information to move at the speed of light. When productivity increases, the total amount of real stuff in the world grows. When there is more food, more housing, and more energy for everyone, living standards rise. Money's only job is to help organize the exchange of that progress. It's the oil in the engine, not the fuel. This thought experiment teaches us the most important lesson about our financial system. Being rich isn't about how many zeros are in your bank account. It's about the value gap between the money that exists and the goods that exist. If everyone becomes a millionaire, the measuring stick of the dollar simply shrinks until the system stabilizes. The numbers change, but the real economy, the skills of the people, the quality of the infrastructure, and the efficiency of the businesses is what determines true wealth. This is why governments can't simply print prosperity. If they could, there would be no poverty in the world. Real growth takes time, labor, and innovation. It can't be bypassed with a printing press. So, what happens if everyone becomes a millionaire? At first, it feels like the ultimate dream, but very quickly, the cold mechanics of the market take over. Prices adjust, incentives break, and the very meaning of the word million shifts. Because money itself isn't the prize. It's just the scoreboard. The real wealth of a society comes from what it can build, produce, and innovate. Once you understand that difference, you stop chasing numbers and start looking at the structural reality of value. If you want to keep understanding how money, wealth, and the hidden mechanics of our world actually work, simply, clearly, and structurally, subscribe. Let's keep fixing the mechanics together.